elected leader and put in their puppet, Poroshenko. And they've used that ever since to, again, demonize Russia. Now, I mentioned that the idea is to create this war, and then after the war, the idea is to say, look, we can't go on like this. So what we're going to have is a world army, which one journalist said to me once, well, he called himself a journalist, what's the use of a world army? There'd be no one to fight. How about the population and keeping the population under control? The world army is being moved into place more and more and more under the name of NATO, among other things. And after this war that they're planning, we let them get away with it, they are going to announce some kind of peace deal, which will be to redraw global society in the image that they planned all along. Now, in my new book, Phantom Self, I quote an insider who described the world that was coming in 1969. And what he described, not only in terms of this, but in all the changes we're seeing in human society today, he was spot on, in detail, all those years ago, 1969. And of course, if this Third World War got out of hand, it could very quickly become nuclear. And in 1969, this insider said this: if there were too many people in the right places who resisted this world dictatorship that he said was coming, there might be a need to use one or two, possibly more, nuclear weapons. This would possibly be needed to convince people that we mean business. By the time one or two of those went off, then everybody, even the most reluctant, he said, would yield. He said that, and this is the point of the aftermath, he said that the negotiated peace would be very convincing in a context that the whole thing was rehearsed, but nobody would know it. See, this is what's happening. You know, they call wars theatres of war. And in so many ways, that's what it is. The whole thing's a theatre. It's a game with actors playing their parts. Sometimes they know their parts, and sometimes they're ignorant, but they play their part because of that ignorance. And it's the whole thing is a perception deception, because from perception comes everything. Perception leads to action or no action, or what action, all depending on the perception. So this is a whole mind game to impose a perception of reality and world events upon the public that suits the outcome that these psychopaths want. So this insider went on. People hearing about the peace deal after the war and the nuclear exchange would be convinced that it was a genuine negotiation between hostile enemies who finally had come to the realization that peace was better than war. The demonization of Russia is becoming so blatant and so obviously coordinated. You've got shots of horrific shots of children in Aleppo in Syria now, being blamed for their death and injuries. Russia being blamed for that. And of course, if you drop bombs where people live, you're going to hit people that are civilians. The point is, the United States, Britain, NATO countries have been killing children and maiming children decade after decade after decade, and certainly in the Middle East in more recent times, year after year after year. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria. And where was all the outrage then from the Western media about the children killed and maimed by Western bombing? But suddenly, the demonization of Russia suits perfectly the presentation of Russia as the evil one killing children. Where were you excuses for journalists when the Western countries were and still are doing it? You have a situation where Saudi Arabia has now said that it would be prepared to put ground forces into Syria. The United Arab Emirates has said the same, and other Arab countries, and these are all, once again, the usual suspects, yawn, who do whatever the United States and the hidden hand tells them to do. You've had the BBC programme, and you've got Russia now saying that it's aware that Turkey is making preparations for an invasion of Syrian territory. And it's all coming together. And now you have a situation where behind the Assad regime, supporting him, is Russia, but also supporting the Assad regime is China, and also another target for this hidden hand, Iran. And you've got America in there, you've got Britain in there, you've got France in there, and on the sidelines there, you've got Israel in there too. And so in that small area of the world, Syria, you've got all the potential for what they want to break out. Knowledge of this global plan for world takeover and the transformation of global society into a Orwellian tyranny and then some. The knowledge of that and the information surrounding that is fiercely compartmentalized. What you're looking at is, well, you can symbolize it in many ways. You can symbolize it as a spider's web with a spider in the middle, and each strand going further out knows less and less and less of what the spider knows, and eventually you won't even know the spider exists if you go far enough out. You can do it as a pyramid with a few people at the top dictating to the pyramid, and further you go down the pyramid, the less and less that people in the pyramid know about what the game is that only those at the top really know. And so when you look at one level of this situation in Syria, you can see it as Russia coming in, Putin coming in, to protect an ally in Assad from blatant attempts to remove him and take over Syria by the West using proxy forces like they did in Libya and elsewhere. You can see it at that level. And on one level, that is happening. But if you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it, you can look at it in another way. The hidden hand that's behind all this, and way beyond the Putins and the Obamas and the Camerons, it has now manipulated the situation it wanted, which was to get Russia and the West in a position where this conflict that they've been planning for so long can break out. And if you take that to be symbolic of the world that we see, the world you see on the news, the world you read about in the papers, the world you see in your everyday life, and it seems to be a certain way. Most of it seems to be random events, random occurrences, random situations. And if people don't grasp how the world is controlled from the hidden by people who give evil a bad name, extreme psychopaths with no empathy and couldn't care less about the suffering of anybody. In fact, they enjoy it. If you don't realize that, then you're never going to understand the world. But fortunately, more and more people are beginning to see that the world is not like they thought it was. Many years now, indeed in my case decades, people called conspiracy theorists have largely been ignored. When they've not been ignored, they've been dismissed as nutters, lunatics, people talking nonsense. But now there is an increasing attempt by different expressions of authority to tell people why they shouldn't listen to people like me and why people like me are not credible to be listened to. That what we say has no validity. Now, if that is true, then what do you have to tell people for? If they're just nutters, well, leave them. They're not a problem, are they? Who's going to believe nutters? Not many. The problem for them is that what we're saying does have validity. And people perceiving world events are increasingly realizing that it makes more sense to see that these events are manipulated into place rather than they're acting or happening by random accident. And so this problem is being met with more and more attempts to dismiss and discredit people who are actually uncovering what's really happening, as opposed to the movie script that we're told by the mainstream media. We've had in very recent times the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, feeling it necessary for some reason to say publicly that the conspiracy, because that's what it is, to manipulate the result of the EU referendum, in and out public referendum, is not a David Icke style conspiracy. Why would he feel the need to say that? And we're having academia more and more coming in, saying that people that believe in conspiracy theories have some kind of psychological problem. And if that's true, what is the problem for authority that makes it feel the need to try more and more, and we've seen nothing yet, to discredit those who are uncovering what those in authority don't want the public to know? This is David Cameron. He took a break in 2014 from selling snake oil to speak at the UN General Assembly. And he was talking about conspiracies when it was about defeating the ideology of extremism. The peddling of lies about a 9/11 plot, or that the 7/7 London attacks were staged, and the idea that Muslims are persecuted all over the world as a deliberate act of Western policy are conspiracy theories. The fact that Muslims are being persecuted all over the world as a deliberate act of Western policy is a conspiracy theory. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria. It's not happening, it's just a theory. And talking about the conspiracy theory of a concept of an inevitable clash of civilizations. It's happening. And even though they're all true, because they're all true, they have to be discredited with this term conspiracy theorist or conspiracy theory, which actually came into more widespread use as a result of a deliberate policy of using that term by the CIA to discredit those uncovering the real background to the Kennedy assassination and other assassinations in the 60s, like that of Martin Luther King. We must be clear, Snake Oil Man went on, To defeat the ideology of extremism, we need to deal with all forms of extremism, not just violent extremism. Now, I'm going to pass that, not just violent extremism, through our Orwellian translation unit. And it comes out as, we must silence those telling the truth about what we're really doing. He goes on. For governments, there are some obvious ways we can do this. We must ban preachers of hate from coming to our countries. We must prescribe organizations that incite terrorism against people at home and abroad. A lot of people now, genuine peaceful protesters and activists, are asking why they are being prosecuted or blocked by laws that were brought in on the pretext of fighting terrorism. Because the answer is that that's exactly what it was, a pretext. You look at these anti-terrorism laws and they're so widely applicable in the way they're written on purpose that they can be applied against anybody. That's the idea, just to get them in. So when Cameron's talking here about extremism and terrorism, what he's really talking about is, in the wider context, as we move through, targeting those who are uncovering the truth or protesting about government policy. He says we must stop the so-called non-violent extremists. Non-violent extremists are people who are exposing through words and peaceful ways what the government is and the authorities in general are really doing. We must stop the so-called non-violent extremists from inciting hatred and intolerance in our schools, our universities, and yes, even our prisons. Intolerance. Intolerance for governments lying to us is what he's talking about. Of course, he says, there will be those who will argue that this is not compatible with free speech and intellectual inquiry. He should have added, but then that's the idea. So we shouldn't stand by and just allow any form of non-violent extremism exposing the government peacefully. But the right-wing extremists in government, they're not a problem. And the racists in government, they're not a problem. And he says to combat this, we must support the building blocks of free and open societies. So when's he going to start in Britain then? This is a man who is so blatantly manipulating and engineering through lies and suppression of the alternative to the lies, the European referendum, talking about a free and open society. And then, after 9/11, when, all that mayhem's taking place, George Bush, boy George Bush, said, again in an address to the United Nations, November the 10th, 2001, he denounced the emergence of, quote, outrageous conspiracy theories that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty. Again, all that mayhem, and he has to go out and make a specific point about conspiracy theories, giving another version of really what happened on 9/11. Why? Because the official story of 9/11 is so full of holes. It's a joke. And it's not about shifting blame away from the terrorists. It's shifting the blame away from the patsies and those blamed for it to hide the fact that the real terrorists, those in the shadows that were ultimately controlling Boy Bush, were the real people responsible for 9/11. Then we have the Obama administration. Top Obama czar infiltrate all conspiracy theorists. We're nutters, right? What's the problem? We're not. That's the problem. Story goes, in a lengthy academic paper, President Obama's regulatory czar Cass Sunstein, argued the US government should ban conspiracy theorizing. Among the beliefs Sunstein would ban is advocating that the theory of global warming is a deliberate fraud, which it is. Now, if the basis of the global warming claims is so powerful and so obvious and so overwhelming, what is the problem of nutters challenging that official story? What problem could something that is so blatantly true, so they claim, have with a few people saying it's not? To the point where the US government should ban conspiracy theorizing. Why? Because, just like 9/11, the official story of global warming and what became climate change when the temperature stopped rising is as full of holes and as nonsensical and as unsustainable as what happened on September the 11th, 2001, according to the official story. Sunstein also recommended the government send agents to infiltrate extremists who supply conspiracy theories to disrupt the efforts of the extremists to propagate their theories. Note, what we're seeing, just mentioned it, but the confirmation goes on and on now. They're trying to associate people who expose conspiracies behind world events. In fact, if people read my books at length, it's actually one gigantic conspiracy with many faces. They are equating, or trying to in the public mind, extremism, extremists, fear, with people called conspiracy, or poke yourself in the eye, people called conspiracy theorists who are exposing the government. In a 2008 Harvard law paper, Conspiracy Theories, how appropriate, Sunstein and a co-author who was a Harvard law professor, ooh, he must be clever, ask, what can government do about conspiracy theories? I've got a question. Why do they feel there's anything to do about them if they're so nonsensical and obviously so? Quote, we can readily imagine a series of possible responses. One, government might ban conspiracy theorizing. Two, I mean, you know, pinch me. Ouch, it's true, he actually said this. Governments might impose some kind of tax, financial or otherwise, on those who disseminate such theories. In a 30-page paper, Sunstein argues the best government response to conspiracy theories is cognitive infiltration of extremist groups. Why? They're nutters, aren't they? As I keep asking. Then, we've got the academic side. You know, God save us from academia. Please. I'll be a good boy. Just God save us from academia. This is a story this week. Believe in conspiracy theories? You're probably a narcissist. People who doubt, in effect, what they're saying, official versions of events, are likely to be selfish and attention-seeking. Whoa. It goes on. Through a number of online studies, not many it turns out, researchers at the University of Kent have showed strong links between the belief in conspiracy theories and those with narcissism and low self-esteem. Who says they found it? They did. In the internet age, conspiracy theories can incubate in quiet corners of the web. Ooh. But it may be psychological predispositions of believers which keep them alive rather than cold, hard facts. See, what they do with so-called conspiracy theories and conspiracy research is they give the impression all the time that it's just a theory. You know, they're just sitting in a darkened room and coming to these conclusions. This is just one of my books. Thin, isn't it? The background information, the background supporting evidence for the fact that there is a global conspiracy to turn this into a global prison state, unfolding by the day, by the way, just watch the news and your own life experience, that somehow there is no evidence when it's enormous. But they don't go there, because you go there, they're on a loser. Let's have an open debate about this. No, they don't. I was on a television program once with an academic from University of London, I think it was. And this is a guy who, for anything alternative whatsoever, is akin to him to garlic to a vampire. He comes from the Richard Dawkins school of the concrete mind. And he's having a go at what I'm saying and what have you, as the cameras are rolling. And I said to him, have you ever read any of my books? And he said, no. So how do you know what I'm saying, especially in detail? I've read it in the papers. This is an academic that we're supposed to be taking seriously in terms of some kind of knowledge of what they're talking about. Anyway, this story goes on about the University of Kent. Over the course of 3 online-based studies, researchers at the University of Kent showed strong links between the belief in conspiracy theories and negative psychological traits. Writing in the journal Social, Psychological and Personality Science, the team explained. Previous research linked the endorsement of conspiracy theories to low self-esteem. Now, one of the things that's building up here, and you'll see build up more and more, is not just a connection between those that can see conspiracies to manipulate world events and terrorism, terrorists, but also the link between people that believe the government's lying and people with psychological problems. And this link's going to be made more and more strongly as we move along. And if people think that's far-fetched, well, look what happened in the Soviet Union. How many dissidents against the Soviet Union tyranny, exposing the tyranny, ended up in mental hospitals to keep them quiet because they were challenging the official version of the Soviet state. Thus they had to be crazy, they had to be mad by definition. The results of these surveys, where they asked people if they agreed with specific statements as to whether governments, for instance, carried out acts of terrorism on their own soil, yes. The results showed that those people who rated highly on the narcissist scale and who had low self-esteem were more likely to be conspiracy believers. Who says? They do. Lead author of the study, a lecturer in social psychology at Kent, again, must be clever, told SciPost.org, because conspiracy theories often refer to malevolent actions of groups, we wanted to distinguish whether it is a narcissistic image of the self or the group that predicts the endorsement of conspiracy theories. Note, it's never, is it the truth that predicts or accepts and endorses conspiracy claims in terms of explaining world events. The link they miss is the link between those who believe in conspiracies and those who believe, because they're intelligent, that governments and those in authority lie. And in terms of evidence, we only have the entire span of known human history to support that obvious fact. And then we've had people I mentioned it in a video cast recently. We've had some academic who reckons he can prove that conspiracy theories are not true through maths. Note, truth is never part of their equation. You know, we are led to believe, and we are pressured and encouraged to believe, that we must look to academia to tell us what we need to know about the world, because they're clever and they're at university and they've got letters after their name, mate. My experience, and if people looked into this subject more deeply, I'm sure it would be the experience of so many others, is that far from being the bastion of knowledge, most, and I mean most, academia is the pollution of intelligence, because its range of thinking, its range of the possible, is akin to the size of a pea. And I'm being optimistic. People say we must be skeptical. No, we mustn't. We must question. You see, there's such a difference between a skeptic and one who questions. Because one who questions, and people should question everything, including what I say, and see if it stands up. But one who questions is questioning in pursuit of the truth. A skeptic, like those very sad people in the skeptic societies around the world, their foundation from the start is that anything outside their pea-sized norm is not true. So their skepticism is not questioning if something's true, it's setting out from the start to try to convince people that it's not. And that is the mentality that infests and infects so much of what we call academia. And so we have this consensus between academics and politicians and journalists that somehow any idea that there is a conspiracy must be nutty, must be dismissed by reflex action, and, oh, let's cut and paste that. What's that phrase again? Conspiracy theorist, that's it. He's a nutter, he's a conspiracy theorist. That's how it works. And so you have journalists who are so, again, infected by the arrogance of ignorance that they ridicule and dismiss those who are actually doing the job that they should be doing, but don't, as song sheet singers for the system. So let's just look for a second at the official definition of a conspiracy. A secret plan made by two or more people to do something that is harmful or illegal. Now, on that basis, how many conspiracies are there going on at all levels of society every day? The act of secretly planning to do something that is harmful or illegal. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that weren't. Classic. Now, a conspiracy theory is officially defined as this: a theory that explains an event as being the result of a plot by a covert group or organization, a belief that a particular unexplained event was caused by such a group. So people don't conspire in secret to bring about the end that they all desire. That doesn't happen. Apparently not. 2, definition of conspiracy theory: the idea that many important political events or economic and social trends are the products of secret plots that are largely unknown to the general public. How much does the general public know about what's going on in authority and government and the banking system and the corporations? How much do they know? I mean, it's almost in mathematical terms, almost indescribable. It's so small, the amount that the public know about what's really going on compared with what's going on in the shadows and the meetings. But no, it's all a myth. And so what we're being asked to believe, in effect, is that governments tell the truth, and thus there can be no conspiracies by governments to manipulate events by telling lies to bring about an end they want. And what I love, people talk about conspiracy theories, and these academics and journalists and politicians talk about conspiracy theorists. Do you know, for me, the strangest people of all are the coincidence theorists. They're the ones, academics, journalists, politicians, great numbers still members of the public, who think that all these connections, all these names that keep coming up, all these organizations that keep coming up across a great swathe of different areas, all this information showing the connections between apparently unconnected people, organizations, and events is all a coincidence. I mean, I think that's a psychological flaw, I think it's a case of terminal naivety. Maybe the University of Kent should do a study. Be interesting. So, here we are in a situation where, for instance, war criminals like Tony Blair and Boy George Bush and all the people around them and behind them, where the real power is, told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, knowing there weren't. They lied through sexed up dossiers. They lied in public statements about the threat of Saddam Hussein because they wanted to invade Iraq because it was on the list of countries to be invaded, which included Libya, Syria, etc. So it comes out, obviously, some of us conspiracy theorists said it before it came out, weapons of mass destruction is a joke. It comes out there weren't any. So there was, under any definition of conspiracy, there was a conspiracy to delude the public into supporting or not opposing the invasion of Iraq on grounds that were known by those that were selling them to be absolutely spurious. But then you say, or you hear, that any idea that there was a conspiracy over 9/11 is a conspiracy theory and they're all mad. It's sobering to ponder on the following. Not just the same agencies, but the very same people who told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew they weren't, were the very same people that gave us the official story of 9/11. And what does it say about alleged journalists worldwide? That despite what has been justified in horror and war, slaughter and suffering on the basis of the official 9/11 story being true. Despite all that, despite the same people telling us that story, telling us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they weren't, I have come across yet no credible mainstream media investigation into whether that official story of 9/11 is true. Do you know, I kind of something to encapsulate mainstream journalists and politicians and what have you. I listened to an interview this week with an investment banker. It was an investment banker who operated at a high level in the financial system. And it just shows you how the truth is kept from people, even in the system. That he was an investment banker working in global finance for a long time before he actually realized and grasped how money is created. The fact that money is created out of nothing, out of fresh air on computer screens by private banks, which gives them control of the entire financial system. And as those banks ultimately are controlled by the same network, it gives that network control over the whole financial system. If you go to my website, on the home page, there's a video explanation of how money is created and the whole financial scam. Anyway, eventually, after years in the business at a high level, he realizes, hey, how money is created. He realizes the whole financial system is a scam. He then, with others, puts an event together where he's going to explain the whole financial scam and how money's created out of nothing by private banks. He sends invitations to 1,200 journalists and 179 politicians just to come and see the presentation. Not one single one of any of them replied and certainly did not turn up. And these are the people who are ridiculing, in their arrogance of ignorance, people who can see what they choose not to see. And so what we are seeing and will see more of are attempts to discredit conspiracy researchers. We're now having Google, YouTube, owned by Google, Facebook, even Twitter's coming into it now, in terms of censoring information or trying to undermine the alternative media in many and various ways. We're having this right to be forgotten law extended, announced this very week, where people can be taken out of Google search engines, in effect, because they've just asked to be taken out because they don't like what someone said about them. And what this is, this right to be forgotten, is simply a stepping stone towards George Orwell's memory hole, where information that the authorities don't want people to see just disappears. Google to extend right to be forgotten to all its domains accessed in the EU, it's EU law. Google will begin blocking search results across all its domains when a search takes place within Europe, in an extension of how it implements the right to be forgotten ruling. The ruling allows EU residents to request the removal of search results that they feel link to outdated and irrelevant information they don't want people to see, about themselves on a country-by-country basis. And this is just the start. They'll want to extend this worldwide. You watch. And now, again, continuing this theme of linking, questioning the official story to terrorism, we have a situation where young people who question government or media may be extremists, officials tell parents, because you've got to get to the kids, because they're the adults of tomorrow. You don't want them awake. Oh, my goodness, nightmare. Child protection officials have been criticised after warning parents that young people who take issue, wait for this, who take issue with government policy or question what they're told in the media may have been radicalised by extremists. A leaflet drawn up by the Inner City Child Safeguarding Board, how Orwellian is that, warns that, by the way, does this Child Safeguarding Board have a branch in Westminster? If it doesn't, well, what's it doing? So the board warns that appearing angry about government policies, especially foreign policies, is a sign specific to radicalisation. So if you're angry about a government owned by the bankers imposing suffering, austerity and poverty on a vast number of people, you are becoming radicalised as an extremist. You see the constant connection in all these different areas. The same theme is being underlined all the time. Parents and carers have been advised by the Safeguarding Children Board in the London Borough of Camden that showing a mistrust of mainstream media reports and a belief in conspiracy theories could be a sign that children are being groomed by extremists. The leaflet says children who show a combination of these and other signs may be en route to emulating those who have been persuaded to leave the country in secret and against the wishes of their family, putting themselves in extreme danger as a result. You see how they're connecting, questioning all areas of the official story with extremists, especially extremists heading off to Syria. This is the psychological mind game that's going on to get people to put the two together in their minds. Local safeguarding children boards are mandated by government all around the country under the Children's Act of 2004. And we're going to see more and more of this because they want to shut down all questioning of anything outside the official norm. And that, as I've said in a recent video cast, is what political correctness is all about. The idiots that extremists in political correctness who seek to impose those destroying pressures on freedom of speech that make people frightened to speak their mind and speak their truth. They're just agents of government, but they have no idea that that's what they are because they're idiots. Bella Sankey, policy director of the campaign group Liberty, criticised the leaflet. Children should be encouraged to take an interest in politics and think critically about what they see in the media, not deemed suspect for doing so. But that is the idea, to make that the case. And so we have had kids at school reported to the authorities and the police for doing things like going to the UKIP website, which is an official political party fighting elections in this country, actually opposing the EU. What was this other one? An A-level student was reported to the police by his headmaster, to the police, for criticising the school in a blog. The student was apparently, according to the headmaster, developing into an anarchist. I wonder if I should report the headmaster for developing into an idiot. See, what we have here is a very simple situation. Not every last fact, not every last claim that conspiracy researchers say about the world is 100% accurate. And there are those who say things that I shake my head about because there's nothing to support it. But the fact is, the great body of conspiracy research, which is cross-referencing information and cross-referencing conclusions, is explaining why the world is as it is, why the few control the world, why we've reached a point now where 1% of the population owns around 50% of the wealth of the world, why this is not an accident, why this is not random. It's designed, it's a conspiracy to bring this about. Just as there's a conspiracy, the same conspiracy, different face, to bring about a police state so the 1% can impose their will on the rest of the population. And when you are selling lies to try to persuade the public that events are random when they're all going in a particular direction, you don't want them to see that. You want them to see dots, not pictures. When your whole foundation of what you want to achieve is based on lies, then of course what you have to do is suppress sources telling the truth about what you're doing and exposing what you're doing. And that's what we're seeing now, and that's why this whole thing with conspiracy theorists is increasing all the time. And we're also seeing that more and more people are looking at these explanations and going, well, you know, they make more sense of the world than what the authorities are telling us. And this is why audiences for mainstream media organizations are falling, many like a stone. And the audience for the alternative media is increasing and increasing and increasing. As long as people are getting crazier and crazier and crazier, it's because they're awakening to what's really going on more and more. And you'll see these attacks on the alternative media, people like me and many others around the world, the alternative media in general, you'll see them increasing. See, in terms of my case, they have tried for years and years and years to dismiss me and discredit me through ridicule. That Ike's mad. But it hasn't worked. It's worked with people that will believe anything and don't read what someone's saying so they can see with their own mind. But with intelligent people, more and more and more, truly intelligent people, not academically intelligent people as they claim, which is not really intelligence, most of it. It's cleverness, which is very different. Remembering facts is cleverness. Intelligence is making sense of those facts. And actually seeing that many of the facts aren't facts at all. So they're trying to ridicule me, but more and more people are looking at what I'm doing anyway. I'm just about to start a world tour. I'm going to talk to thousands of people all over the world, literally all over the world. So the ridicule's not worked. So what you'll see, and it will be the case with the alternative media in general, is it will turn to hostility and to antagonism and condemnation and all that stuff. And what's happening now is summed up in this quote by Gandhi. First they ignore you, been there. Then they laugh at you, been there. Then they fight you, coming. Then you win. Coming. The crucial foundation method of pushing the world in the direction this hidden hand wants is on public display with this whole manipulation of the European Union referendum. And by that I mean fear. There's a stablemate of fear in this technique of manipulation, and it's called chaos. You put fear and chaos together, and you create a situation where people become open to A, being protected from what they've been manipulated to fear, and B, in a state of chaos, people are looking for order out of the chaos. And if you can present your order, in other words, your agenda, as a solution to the chaos, then vast numbers of people are going to be open to your solution, which is taking your agenda along the road you want it to go. Now, here's a motto from the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry: Ordo ab chaos. Order out of chaos. And it's what I've been calling for decades now, the technique of problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem, you tell the public the version of the problem that you want them to believe. You're looking at stage 2 for the people to react with fear, and basically something must be done, do something about it. And then those who've created the problem covertly, got the reaction, do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created. And we see this with the problem reaction of war, the problem reaction of terrorism, the problem reaction of economic collapse, the problem reaction of viruses, the latest virus scare that comes out, and we see the solutions to the problems and the reactions which are pushing this agenda on that I've been exposing now for a quarter of a century. And all this comes together in current events with the migrant crisis. We are seeing every day horrific pictures of families and children who are fleeing war zones created by the very European Union, United States coalition, the countries of the so-called West in general, who have targeted country after country in the Middle East, created mayhem, fear, chaos, and the result of that chaos has been vast numbers of people heading out to Europe, crossing the sea in very, very dangerous conditions, and then walking through Europe. And at the moment, because of the border effectively being closed to all but a few between Greece and Macedonian border, we're seeing a massive backlog of people in Greece. And the pictures are tragic. But as I'm going to explain, there are other facets to this that are part of this bigger conspiracy. It's kind of ironic that Greece, the so-called birthplace of democracy, is being devastated by a combination of EU and other externally instigated economic crises which have brought that country and its people to their knees. And now that is being compounded by this enormous number of migrants who are trying to get into Europe through Greece and are now being held back at the Macedonian border. We've already seen the incredible numbers of migrants who have entered Europe, gone into countries like Germany, and of course the camps in France at Calais, etc., of people who want to make the step into Britain. And what we see is heartbreaking when you see these families and these children. But there is, like I say, a much bigger picture to this. if you ever see something in black and white, then you've got a skewed view of it, because it very rarely is. The truth is almost always found in the shades of grey. And what we have here is not a black and white situation with this migration crisis. In there, you have genuine people who are fleeing wars and tyranny, most of which, almost all of which, are being created by the very Western countries that they are seeking to head into, and the West in general. Countries like Britain, France, the United States, of course, always involved, and Germany's in there in the background as well. And so we see these genuine migrants, and absolutely these refugees of war and tyranny should be absorbed into European communities. They should be given help, not least because the West in general is the cause of their problem, the genuine refugees. But what we also have among this vast movement of people are others who are not fleeing tyranny and not fleeing war. They are taking the opportunity to jump on that flow of people, and for their own reasons. Now, first of all, that is making it far more difficult for the genuine people by adding to the sheer numbers. And some of these people are not very nice. And, well, that's racist. No, it's not. You give me any group of people, large group of people, I don't care if they are black, brown, white, sky blue, pink. There will be genuine people in there. There will be nice people in there. There will be people who in need of help in there. And there will be arseholes in there. It's the same the world over, no matter what culture, what country, what race you're talking about. But what we see is this black and white polarity that has developed, where you've got people on the what would be called the far right, who are basically saying, keep them all out. Keep them all out. People in desperate need because of what Western countries have done to their country. What kind of compassion is that? What kind of humanity is that? Don't be silly. And then you've got on the other polarity, on the left of politics, people basically saying, let them all in, which is just as bloody stupid because of the consequences for everybody of that. You know, in Britain alone, there are people already here, black, white, all shades of colour and race, who are in desperate need because of austerity programs and so on, who are struggling, who are homeless. And you can't just say, let everybody in. And what about the effect on them? And what about the effect of people coming in who also will, many of them will end up in the same way? This has to be seen from a bigger picture point of view, and it has to be dealt with from that knowledge. First of all, if you're going to sort out the migrant crisis, you have to, first of all, stop this systematic war in the Middle East. Because as I've explained in the books and in recent videocasts, there is a list of countries which they've been ticking off since 9/11. Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc. And these have wars of acquisition, because that's what they are, and devastation, have caused such incredible upheaval in those countries that Iraqis and Syrians and Libyans are now trying to head for Europe. And if you don't stop the cause, you're not going to stop the flow of people seeking to escape what you have caused. So there's number one. That has to be sorted out. And we've got to go beyond this black and white idea that you let everybody in no matter what, instead of letting in genuine people in genuine need of help and looking differently to those who are simply piggybacking that for their own ends. Because there is a much bigger picture here, like I keep saying. The plan, and this locks into the European Union and Cameron with his referendum. The plan is to break up Europe into regions ruled by dark suit bureaucrats in Brussels. No countries, that's the plan. Break them up, end sovereign nations, and break them up into regions ruled from the centre in Brussels. Now, there is obviously going to be a terrific resistance to that from people who value their country, value their nation, value their sense of culture. And I quote in my new book, Phantom Self, an insider who said in 1969 that it is much easier to break up nations when you fill those nations, I'm paraphrasing here, when you fill those nations with people from a different culture, than it is if you try to do it with people who are from that culture, from that nation. And so, this insider said, 1969, they were going to instigate massive immigration between cultures to break down the sense of nationhood, in effect, the sense of culture, so that those countries could be broken up and taken over by a much greater supranational force, i.e., in this case, the European Union. And that's what we're seeing. I heard an interview this week with a very genuine person of what you would call the left, talking about the migrant crisis and talking about the German Chancellor Merkel in almost terms that she was a heroine for what she's done in opening Germany's doors without question to anyone that basically wants to come in. And this is so indicative of how the left in politics has lost the plot by not understanding what the plot is. Chancellor Merkel is a 100% owned pawn of this hidden hand that I talk about. And thus, when she does something, it's because the hidden hand has demanded it. And if you look at what I'm talking about here, the breakdown of a sense of culture, one of the countries in Europe that has the greatest sense of culture, the greatest sense of itself, is Germany. And so Germany has been targeted up to this point more than any other country with this migrant agenda. And so what you have, again, taking away the black and white, you have these migrants, great numbers of which are absolutely genuine and should be allowed in and should be helped, not least because we caused the problem. I say we, the West. And you've got this other enormous number of migrants who have piggybacked those genuine people to get in for their own reasons. And they and the indigenous population that has been affected by this have been played off against each other by the same hands holding the same strings. Because what they want is a breakdown of the sense of culture to dilute opposition to breaking up Europe into regions and ending nations and ending countries. And they want conflict and they want upheaval between the migrants and the, at least some of the indigenous population. Because that creates, here we go, fear and chaos. And out of fear and chaos, they can offer their solutions to end fear and chaos, which actually lead to more fear and chaos. That's the way it works. And so if you want to introduce a police state, if you want to introduce more and more surveillance, more and more control, then you want upheaval, you want violence, you want conflict, because that's a problem to which you can offer your solution, which is more and more police state. They've done it with terrorism quite blatantly by saying we must take your freedoms away to protect your freedoms. And over the last week, there has been the text, the contents of a new book by a guy called Tom Bauer, an investigative journalist, that's been serialized in a British newspaper. And it's about Tony Blair. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about Tony Blair today, because Tony Blair personifies everything that is wrong with British and global politics. And he also personifies the frontman for this global agenda orchestrated from the hidden, from the shadows, by people we never see. The book reveals the background in detail after talking to civil servants and ministers and politicians, etc., and insiders around Blair in his years as British Prime Minister. And it reveals the background to the invasion of Iraq, which was completely manipulated to find an excuse, weapons of mass destruction, to justify to the public an invasion of Iraq. Problem, weapons of mass destruction, or the suggestion of it, the claim of it. Solution, invade Iraq, get rid of Saddam. It talks about the way, the book talks about the way that the invasion of Afghanistan was manipulated by Blair and a tiny few people around him, excluding even the cabinet of his own government. And it also talks about how Blair and his Home Secretaries in the period of the Blair government systematically and very consciously opened the doors to mass immigration because they wanted to, in the words of one insider, they wanted to change the face of Britain forever, irreversibly, by mass immigration of other cultures. Now, what I'm saying here is not whether that's right or whether that's wrong in terms of what they call the multicultural society. That's not the point of what this video cast is about. I'm not saying anything regarding, immigration in and of itself at all. What I'm pointing out is that mass immigration into Britain under the Blair government was done on purpose for a specific end. Did they do it because they cared about the immigrants coming in? No, they couldn't give a damn. They did it to change the face of Britain irreversibly forever. Because Blair is a front man for this hidden hand. That's why he's done all that he's done. And I'll go into that as we go through the videocast. And what we're seeing now is a much expanded European version of the same technique. And right, left, center, whatever people call themselves, need to stop fighting each other and arguing with each other. And all parties, left, right, center, migrant, European population, need to turn their eyes on what is really happening. And that is that the migrants and the European population are both being used as pawns in a game that has massive implications for everybody. A game, an agenda that is designed to restructure Europe in its entirety and put it under the total control of a fascist communist, both the same if you are living under it, European Union. And that, again, should be in the minds of anyone when they come to vote in this EU referendum over whether Britain stays in or comes out. Because, as I keep emphasizing, we are seeing a process here. We are seeing an unfolding agenda. If you think it's bad now, strap in, because they've hardly started. And if we go on seeing the world and events like the migrant crisis in purely black and white terms, without seeing its context in the greater scheme of manipulation, then we'll go on fighting each other and arguing with each other while the holders of the strings go on taking the world where they've long planned to take it. There are many potential definitions for fascism, but few surely could compete with the fascism that says that the state can dictate what we can and cannot do with our bodies in terms of health and well-being. But that is what is happening with gathering extremes all over the world. And it takes a two-pronged attack. On one side, there is more and more pressure and legislation to impose potions and poisons produced by the deeply corrupt pharmaceutical industry, or big pharma. And we see this in the increasing numbers of laws around the world involving compulsory vaccinations. And on the other side, there is the war against natural products, food supplements, and nutrition produced by people and companies that are not part of the big pharma cartel. There is a war on that industry for many reasons, some of them very deep, which I'll get into later, and some purely financial, destroying the opposition. And as more and more people reject big pharma excuse for healthcare, then the pressure to destroy the alternative for them to go to gets more and more and deeper and extreme beyond words. Extreme beyond words. How about this? That you change the law that means that those that produce natural health products cannot, in effect, tell potential users what they do. Now, you will have seen, we all see all the time, big pharma advertisements on television for this drug or this gel or whatever. And there it is telling you what it does. And you have people saying, yeah, it's great, this, actors like, never bloody used it. And that's fine. But the law and the war upon natural health products has reached the point where they can't really say what they do. So, well, you could use this. Why? Can't tell you, mate. What do you mean you can't tell me? I can't tell you what it does. I'm just saying you could consider using it. Well, has anybody used it and found it works? Well, can't tell you. Have you got any testimonials from people who've used it? Well, yeah. Well, where are they? Can't show me, mate. This is the level of lunacy and blatant bias to which we have now descended in this big pharma takeover of what bravely goes under the name of healthcare. It's been going on and building up for a long, long time. It involves an organization. I mean, you can't make this up. And if you did and you put it out in some fictional form, they'd say, oh, that's too far-fetched. At the background to what I'm describing is an organization called Codex Alimentarius, which is kind of Latin for food code or food book. It was created in the 1960s by Nazis involved with the notorious Icke Farben that ran the Auschwitz concentration camp. The people that put the words above the entrance gate to Auschwitz, which translate as work sets free or work makes free. They created in the 1960s Codex Alimentarius. And ever since, it's been given more and more power to impose regulation upon natural products, to the point where hundreds and thousands of them are in the process of being removed, natural products, by these regulations, which allows big pharma to produce synthetic versions of them, which they can then patent. Synthetic versions of them. Let's look at the definition of synthetic. A substance made by chemical synthesis, especially to imitate a natural product. Exactly. To imitate a natural product. It is not the same as the natural product, but you can patent it and have control of it. And this is happening all the time. What they're doing, because the same network that I've been exposing in the books all these years controls governments and controls big pharma, laws are passed that allow pharmaceutical companies to create synthetic versions and patent them and market them of natural products which government regulation is taking out of use. It's that simple. It's that scale of a blatant scam. Another definition of synthetic: not genuine insincere. And on that basis, Big Pharma is synthetic. So here we have this obvious, like I say, blatant bias, because the idea is to take out of circulation the whole complementary therapy and medicine arena and give a total global monopoly on what we can do with our bodies in terms of health and well-being to the big pharma cartel, which in the end is controlled by the same network that controls the banks, the major corporations, the governments, the mainstream media giants, etc. Now, let me give you an example of the contrast. This is something that I've been taking for years called spirovine, and it comes from the wood of the grapevine, not the fruit, the wood of the grapevine, and there are very significant reasons for that in terms of what it can do. Now, like I say, I've been taking it for years. The spirovine is simply a trade name used by a friend of mine on the Isle of Wight that produces it. And let me make it absolutely clear, I have no financial involvement with this whatsoever. There's an advert for it on my website, which I give for free, and I have paid the full price for every single one of these that I've ever taken over the years. I'm doing this, well, for many reasons. One is as a potent example of the contrast between what the complementary and alternative therapy arena can do compared with Big Pharma. Now, this, and this is only some of them, these are mainstream laboratory, university papers of studies into parts of what things like spirovine contain. You probably never heard of any of this because, well, Big Pharma's not producing it. But there are papers from China, from Austria, Germany, France, United States, Canada, and they talk about the effect and the studies that they've done into something, in this case, resveratrol, which is some of what's in spirovine and this whole arena of the wood of the grapevine. And they talk about its effect on cancer, leukemia, heart disease, other things too. And this first paper, I'm not going to read them all, you'll be glad to know, but I will give you some words to put into a search engine where you can research for yourself, which is it's called Freedom, isn't it? I do believe it is. This is from the Department of Cell Biology and Institute of Biomedicine, College of Life Science and Technology, Jinan University, Guangzhou in China. And it says, resveratrol oligomers target a wide range of molecules that influence cell proliferation, apoptosis, which is like killing cells that need killing, and metastasis, secondary growths. Although the preventative and anti-cancer mechanism of resveratrol oligomers cannot be limited to a specific pathway, protein, or gene, their use as preventative and anti-cancer agents has limitless possibilities and should continue to be pursued in future studies. What I can do is give you a list of words to put into a search engine. There we go. You could freeze the video when it's done. Put those words into a search engine and you can research yourself the background to what I'm talking about and these derivatives, if you like, from the wood of the grapevine and what the research is showing. Now, what they are now doing is creating, wait for it, a synthetic version of that. Now, the natural version already exists. So why do we need a synthetic version? Anyway, that's what is unfolding. This is a paper from the School of Graduate Studies, East Tennessee State University, talking about the synthesis of derivatives of resveratrol as potential anti-cancer drugs. And it says here, resveratrol is a naturally occurring derivative of the stilbene family produced by various plants in response to stress, UV radiation, and fungal attack. It's primarily found in peanuts, berries, grape skin, and red wine. Resveratrol has been found to exhibit anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, and antioxidant properties. Research indicates that diets enriched with resveratrol containing substances result in less incidence of cancer. And it goes on to talk about the fact that the idea is to find a synthetic version of it. And here's a story from the Daily Mail from 2013. Notice, natural version already exists. Ever read about that in the papers? No. Here we go. New drug being developed using compound found in red wine could help humans live until they are 150. See, you can say that. Now, if you said that about that, then the authorities would be knocking on your door. The story goes, drugs are synthetic versions of resveratrol found in red wine, found in massive quantities, among other things, in the wood of the vine. Research shows drugs which could prevent cancer and diabetes now viable. Say that about that, rat-a-tat-tat. Medication can be taken topically or orally. No drugs yet developed to target aging skin. It goes on. Drugs that could combat aging and help people to live to 150 years old may be available within 5 years following landmark research. Really? The new drugs are synthetic versions of resveratrol, which is found in red wine and is believed to have an anti-aging effect as it boosts activity of a particular protein. Here we go. Pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline has been testing the medications on patients suffering with medical conditions, including cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. The work proves that a single anti-aging enzyme in the body can be targeted with the potential to prevent age-related diseases and extend lifespans. As each of the 117 drugs tested work on a single enzyme through a common mechanism, it means that a whole new class of anti-aging drugs, synthetic drugs, is now viable. Woo! Think of the profit, mate. Which could ultimately prevent cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and type 2 diabetes. Genetics professor David Sinclair, based at Harvard University, we must be clever, said, ultimately, these drugs would treat one disease, but unlike drugs of today, they would prevent 20 others. Now, here we go, all there. Excuse me, mate, what does that do? Can't tell you. Against the law. My God. And we stand for this. The target enzyme is switched on naturally by calorie restriction and exercise, but can also be enhanced through activators it's talking about. Although research surrounding resveratrol has been going on for a decade, until now the basic science had been contested. They found a synthetic version, suddenly it's not. Isn't that funny? Whoa! Coincidence, synchronicity. It's amazing, isn't it, life? Despite this, there have already been promising results in some trials with implications for cancer, cardiovascular disease and cardiac failure, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, fatty liver disease, cataracts, osteoporosis, muscle wasting, sleep disorders, and inflammatory diseases such as psoriasis, arthritis, and colitis. Professor Sinclair said, in the history of pharmaceuticals, there has never been a drug that tweaks an enzyme to make it run faster. The technology was sold to GlaxoSmithKline in 2008. So far, there have been no drugs, the article says, developed to target aging skin, but one major skincare range has developed a cream with resveratrol in it. While any drug would be strictly prescribed for certain conditions, Professor Sinclair suggests that one day they could be taken orally as a preventative. In animal models, overweight mice given synthetic resveratrol were able to run twice as far as slim mice, and they lived 15% longer. Professor Sinclair said, now we are looking at whether there are benefits for those who are already healthy. Things there are looking promising. We're finding that aging isn't the irreversible affliction that we thought it was. Some of us could live to 150, but we won't get there with more research. I wonder if, given what they're claiming for the synthetic version of what they're doing, what a natural version would do by comparison, which can actually sync with the body instead of being a imitation of what would sync with the body. And here's a quote from a natural practitioner, if you like, which sums it up really. He said, you can't say, talking about a product, you can't say it has any benefits because the authorities say that if it is of benefit, then it is a drug. And the scam, or one of them, is to get natural products designated as drugs, because then they come under the same authorities and control that, I was going to say control Big Pharma, actually, is supposed to control Big Pharma, and thus you bring them into a financial arena, I'll get into this later, where natural producers of natural health products simply cannot compete in that arena with what the regulations demand once it's designated a drug. Okay, so that's some of what complementary medicine and natural health products, food supplements, etc., are having to deal with. What about Big Pharma? I don't know if they have this advert in America and around the world, probably, but certainly in Britain. People watching this, I'm sure, will have seen this. You've got some bloke, an actor, and he's got a bad back or something. And his wife's talking about how his back, oh, it was so bad. And then they cut to him, apparently, next to no time later, and he's dancing around the floor in no pain whatsoever. Bloody stuff must be miraculous. And they can do that, Big Pharma. They can get through the advertising trading standards. They can get through the so-called authorities that's supposed to make sure that you don't claim things that are not possible and are not proven. And yet alternatives cannot even say what the thing is supposed to be for. And this advertisement with a dancing bloke who had a bad back 10 minutes ago is for something called Voltarol. And the active ingredient in Voltarol is diclofenac. It's an anti-inflammatory, for back pain, muscle pain, neck pain, etc. It's a gel, this Voltarol stuff, with the active ingredient of diclofenac. Okay, here's another story from the same newspaper that ran the story about the synthesized version of resveratrol. GPs ignore heart attack and stroke risk of painkiller used by millions. Research shows that taking the painkiller diclofenac increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes by 63%. Ooh, put the music on. Scientists are calling for the drug to be banned as safer alternatives are available. Patients are told not to stop taking the pill. Ooh, don't do that. But to seek advice from their GP, who will seek advice from the drug rep that's coming around on Tuesday. Doctors are writing millions of prescriptions a year, it says, for a painkiller that is known to raise the risk of heart attacks and strokes, a study has warned. Diclofenac is given by GPs to ease the pain of arthritis, backache, gout, and other common conditions. A review of existing research showed the drug is one of the riskiest of its type, raising the danger of heart attacks and strokes, including fatal incidents, by up to 63%. That this risk is almost identical to that of the painkiller of Vioxx, which was withdrawn from worldwide sales in 2004 because of cardiovascular risk. The study's authors are calling for diclofenac to be banned or severely restricted in use. Whoa, hey, I like that song. And they accused family doctors who issued almost 5 million prescriptions for the drug in England in 2011 of being complacent about the dangers of not warning patients of the risks. Well, the drug company rep came round last week. He said it were all right. Here you go. In a review of studies on painkillers, known as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which also include ibuprofen, co-author Patricia McGettigan of Barts and the London School of Medicine and Dentistry found that diclofenac had the highest risk. The doctor said that the dangers have been well documented, so GPs are either not keeping up with the latest research or simply ignoring the warnings. She said, this drug improves symptoms, but patients are not stuck for alternatives. There are strong arguments to revoke its marketing authorizations globally. It's marketed worldwide under different names and trade names. It's made by a drug company giant called Novartis, which makes the low-dose form of the drug. And said, the Novartis said, patient safety is its top priority, and it fully supports the European review of its safety. And a spokesman added that the company is confident that the information available to date shows the benefits outweigh the risks. Did that dancing bloke mention the risks? I don't kind of recall that he did. Anyway, diclofenac tablets can now only be prescribed, not bought over the counter as before, because of the risk of heart disease. That was in January last year that restriction was imposed, and diclofenac was first introduced in 1973. And here's the story, kind of connected. Well, connected to say the least, but in a strange way. Vulture-killing drug still for sale. Fine survey. This is a story on BBC Nature, which says a toxic drug that threatens India's critical endangered vultures is still widely available, a survey has found. Diclofenac was banned for use by vets and farmers in 2006 because of the effect on vultures that feed on livestock carcasses. Despite advances in captive breeding, conservationists warn the bird's future in the wild cannot be guaranteed. Numbers of the latter species, it lists a number of vulture species, also known as oriental whiteback vultures, are estimated to have dropped by 99.9% in the past decade. Did he mention that? Oh yeah, he's back on my back. Fantastic. This is what is happening. before our eyes. It is undiluted fascism, where big pharma products are being increasingly imposed upon us either directly, like compulsory vaccinations, or indirectly by constant marketing programming and perception programming, so we think that's the only thing that will work. And at the same time, the natural alternatives are being systematically destroyed and taken out of existence, denying us the basic definition of freedom, surely, that we should ourselves decide what goes into our bodies and what doesn't, and how we respond to the health or disease of our bodies, and how we